1999. North Melbourne won the Premiership Cup. Except they didn't. At the beginning of the season, in a frankly bizarre attempt to win more fans outside of Victoria's borders, they changed their name to the Kangaroos. And yeah, it's not like they haven't done this before many times, but this did put a lot of the club's traditional fan base offside. Still, that success came against a powerhouse of the AFL. Except it didn't. Carlton were a bit of a mess in the 1990s despite their 1995 title. That title actually scuppered merger plans with St Kilda, as the Saints thought the more successful Carlton were trying to take them over. In a very similar way, a proposed 1999 merger between Carlton and the Kangaroos fell through because both teams made the grand final. Yeah, really. North President Ron Casey was keen to merge with Carlton even after the rationalisation packages expired following the Fitzroy-Brisbane merger. North were still struggling to make ends meet, and the Carlton Kangaroos idea sounded like a good way to balance the books whilst adding a few stars to the lineup to make a legacy team. Not much else really exists in terms of concrete evidence, but the proposal quickly fell through. Heading into 2000, the Roos were still powerful on-field despite their financial issues. Unfortunately, here's where the cracks start to form. Dennis Pagan will be the first to tell you that the Roos didn't deserve the 1999 flag. Despite their age profile suggesting they were an empire in waiting, in reality their 7 prelims on the trot should have seen them claim empire status already. They hadn't, thanks to 2 suspensions for the 1997 prelim and the 22 misses in the 1998 decider. Forces old and new were emerging that would take the league by storm, but as 2000 began, the Roos were dealt the pinprick that would evolve into an uncontrollable bleed. Dennis had a son. Well, still has one, but in 1999, Ryan Pagan is 22 and watching on as the Kangaroos are having a fucking miserable draft week. They've traded all their good picks as well as Premiership paperweight Cam Mooney for 2 players who would combine for just over 100 games. Oh, and Scott Welsh is out the door as well. That's 2 future 50-goal forwards lost in the one trade period. Sure hope nothing happens to Carey.
Foreshadowing as a narrative device.
They had a fun selection of draft picks, of which the earliest was pick 53, and while getting guys like Matt Burton and Troy Makepeace is technically a success that late on, well, they weren't exactly a King or an Allison type. Good news, they picked up an Ablett in the rookie draft. Bad news, it was Michael, son of Lenny, the one son of Alfred Ablett who didn't play an AFL game. Unfortunately, Michael notched the same tally as Lenny. And speaking of Nepo babies, pick 60 rolls around for North, and they select one Ryan Pagan. Now, Ryan was no slouch. He deserved to be on an AFL list by killing it in the reserves. His dad fought hard for him to be selected and secured a round 1 spot for his boy, getting just the 11 touches. He stays in the squad for the next 2 games for ever-diminishing returns until his plug is pulled after round 3. The chairman of selectors resigns, Ryan is dropped, and despite impressing Terry Wallace at the Dogs, his age is held against him, this being the pre-Michael Barlow era, and he never plays again. This incident, although seeming minor, would set the wheels in motion that would end the Pagan era. The CEO, who happened to be said chairman of selectors' brother-in-law, was looking for a more hands-off shot caller. For now, the Roos wouldn't hit the same heights as their 1999 season. A late slump dropped them to 4th, which wasn't bad by any means, where they would go up against an Essendon squad that loyal GAZ-man viewers are familiar with, the team that fundamentally changed how football was played due to their success. The Roos scored 9 goals to 3/4 time. Not great, but certainly not the worst performance that weekend. Essendon scored 9 goals in the first quarter. By the time 3/4 time rolled around, Essendon had scored another 16. It was a bulldozing and an embarrassment. The Kangaroos limped past a mediocre Hawthorn before being put to the sword by a flash-in-the-pan Melbourne side whose big star was Shane Woden. From here, things start to fall apart. Their first game in 2001 was another demolition at the hands of the Bombers, where 9 goals was their full-time total. A horrendously low-scoring victory against the Cats was their only win in their first 6 games, but by round 15 they'd managed to scrape their way back to 9th, only percentage keeping them out of the 8. The AFL fixture used to be a lot simpler. After the first 15 rounds, the fixture went back to the top and swapped home and away teams. So, who was it that the Roos played first again? The Bombers were 13-2, with a percentage of nearly 147, but the Roos wanted to prove that they were back. I'll probably make a video just on this game alone in the future, so I'll try and keep this short. It took the Roos 90 seconds to score through Grant, a smart finish from a stoppage. Lloyd, halfway through the best season from a forward in the history of the game, converts an easy one. Byron Pickett then scrubs one through, sparing Lee Colbert's blushes. Almost straight after, new hire and the eternally underrated Severio Rocker proves way too strong for a mere mortal. He would score again at the 15-minute mark with a goal for each side sandwiched in between. Jess Sinclair then takes a great mark whilst Heffernan tries to rip his head off, with 6 points Sinclair's reward. As the clock ticks over to 20 minutes past, you'd say this has been a great return for the Kangaroos. Brent Harvey is about to make it better. Johnny on the spot in the pack, he's too quick to catch. Pagan's Paddock still working wonders in 2001. The commentators are literally getting their breath back as the Roos set up the next. McCartney's long bomb from the centre bounce finding Rocker, who converts from range. It's 48-14. The next centre bounce is even more efficient. A long bomb over the top, a quick forward running onto it. With his 7th kick of the term, Harvey scores his 2nd goal. North then settle down a bit, taking a whole 3 minutes before Moorcroft misses. North, just for fun, take it all the way up the ground the other end, resulting in Rocker's 4th goal. We're 26 minutes in, against a team that's only lost 3 of their last 40 games, a team that's lost their heads as Pickett grabs a free for this outrageous tackle. He has 2 goals now. Essendon has 2 goals. North has 11, and it's still not over. Sinclair embarrasses Blake Carosella and pounds one home from close to the 50. North can do nothing wrong. Really, the quarter's about to end, and they've kicked 12 straight. There's no time left, but there's just enough time for the lightning-fast David King to burst out of the midfield and drive a long-range shot home for a single point. They were human after all, the single scoring blemish souring an otherwise perfect quarter. North led 12-1 73 to 2-3 15. Look at King. This is not the look of a man who's put his team 8 goals up. This is defeat. They wanted Essendon to be humiliated. All this shot showed was that North could bleed. And as Kevin Sheedy knows all too well, if it bleeds, it can be killed. Only a showing against a 90s Richmond team when the game had longer quarters beat it for North's best showing in an opening term. In fact, in the 20-quarter era, North's only had one better quarter overall, a final term against Freo 12 months before this game. They've only come within 3 goals of this mark in any quarter 7 times in the 25 years since. Troy Makepeace, an ordinary dude in the middle of all of this, just said that he was kind of in the way of his own team doing godly things. Both sides went into the quarter-time huddle in different ways. One of Pagan's assistants excitedly nerded numbers out of his face hole, saying that they'd score 48 goals today if they kept this pace up. Pagan's response to that was fear. Fear of awakening the black and red monster. Essendon, well, before Sheedy could give them the spray of a lifetime, heard the skipper, pulled them up and said, hey, 10 goals. What's that? 3 goals we need to peg back per term plus 1 for luck. We can do that. We can do that. Let's do that. Spray averted. Essendon could build back methodically. As for the North players, their confidence was high. They'd done this without Carey and Stevens, both out with injury, while Mick Martin's absence was really a non-factor so far. And look, if Essendon were any other team, and I'm talking literally any other team in the last 100 years of football, this match is all over right here. But this was not only one of the greatest teams of all time, here these two clubs were in the middle of some prime rib level beef. Sheedy, before the 1998 finals duel between the two, had compared two of North's execs to marshmallows. Upon the Roos' win, he was pelted with marshmallows by North fans, which is objectively hilarious, though not as hilarious as Pagan having his front garden strewn with them the morning after. So the atmosphere was tense in the second. Well, until about 9 minutes in, when Shannon Grant puts the margin to 69, nice, and wheels out some finger guns to celebrate. Pew pew! That did it. That woke the monster. In an insane quarter, no more behinds are registered, but 10 more goals are scored. The goal scorers? Johnson, Hurd, Lloyd, Carosella, Lloyd, Bolton, Johnson, Teague. David Teague's steadier after the siren to end the term also ended a run of 9 straight goals to the Bombers, who'd gotten the margin as low as 15. North's rapid ball movement had been slowed, stymied, it was gone, and Essendon intercepted and methodically passed their way back into it. North were overcommitting in defence to stop that purely out of desperation, which wasn't helping their cause. Lloyd's 7th, with his 7th kick, gets Essendon within 7 early in the third, which starts a protracted seesawing battle. Both Johnsons score, and then, of all people, Corey McGrath wheels around and reduces the gap to a single point. McKernan bobs up with a wonder goal, then Hurd counters him. Watt, who'd been minding Lloyd till goal number 7, scores himself somehow, and then Pickett receives a 50-metre penalty thanks to some Essendon dissent, and his goal, plus a late rocker miss, set the margin at 14. One term to go. The first bounce, well, Essendon clears it straight into Lloyd's hands. He scores his 9th and thankfully final goal, but then the Roos, who'd been so accurate all day, well, they start missing. 15 minutes into the last, their 5 scores this term result in 1 goal for. Meanwhile, goals for Ramanauskas, Johnson and Moorcroft see Essendon with a 1-point lead. North delivers into their forward line. The Motlop shot from 15 out covered about 10 of those metres. Carosella triggers a lightning-fast rebound, and there's that man. Corey McGrath. This is game 8 of a career that will not hit great heights. He tries to find Alessio with a pass, but misses. His punishment is the ball dribbling through for an undeserved goal. This is the moment. The perfect start had been undone. Essendon had the momentum now, and this was the play that showed it. A sublime finisher missing everything, and then a player best known for being a tagger at mid-2000s Carlton, accidentally goaling at the other end as a result. 2 quick goals after this will extend the gap to 19, and despite McKernan's best efforts to will his team back by himself, it's done. Essendon will win one of the greatest games of football of all time by 12 points, retaining top spot. North will rue every chance they missed, not that there were many, and slip into 11th. Don Quixote wins exactly one battle. He wins it against the Knight of the Mirrors, who is actually just someone from his hometown trying in good faith to stop Quixote's delusions. In fact, to goad the Don, he claims he has beaten Quixote before, and indeed every night worth fighting. They duel and Quixote wins almost by accident, with the Knight of the Mirrors stunned at what has happened. He later redresses as the Knight of the White Moon with an upgraded, faster steed. He is almost unbeatable. Quixote, however, has the same tired horse and gear, as the last battle. His confidence is high early, but he's absolutely humiliated. This is the end of Don Quixote's journey. As a battle condition, he is forced to abstain from the life of chivalry, eventually losing his visions of grandeur. He is an ordinary man now. The scales of glamour and success have dropped, as they have for our heroes. This McGrath goal and the collapse that followed spelled an end to the era of success Pagan had brought in. Indeed, this signalled the end of any real relevance that North had on the average footy fan. The arse fell out of the Roos season from there, as before their only victims across a long span of losing were Geelong, falling into 13th. If success is your bag, well, I'm amazed you've hung around this long, but we've exhausted our supply. I'm sorry, we are getting no new shipments anytime soon, and neither is the place next door. What we do have for you is a near limitless supply of stumbles, chokes, some minor crimes, a couple of weird little trinkets, and other assorted boobery and boners that will no doubt amuse and entertain the family alike. No trophies will be won, no legends will be born anew, no idols shall remain. Winston Abraham, for example, would play only 1 minute of the 2001 season before suffering a freak injury that would end his career. And then we have the king himself, Wayne Carey. Carey had suffered a suspension in the penultimate 2001 game. He'd played alright, but not great, in a narrow loss. He kicked 3 goals, won that behind, proving North's last score as Big Richo won it for the Tigers late on. It would also be the last game Wayne Carey would ever play for North Melbourne. Up until now, we've focused on Wayne Carey, the player. Now let's take a look at Wayne Carey, the man. Carey's upbringing was fractured, moving between Wagga Wagga and Adelaide, the poor bastard, as his parents divorced. His father was an alcoholic, a felon, and prone to violent outbursts, and sadly, Carey went down a similar path, resulting in a number of scandals, usually drug or alcohol-fueled. The first, in 1997, involved grabbing a woman by the breasts as he passed and yelling abuse at her in an incident that Tism's bassist Jock Cheese would later immortalise in song.
Carey, dear, I know this doctrine.
Apparently, according to some, that woman was the girlfriend of a gangland shooter or whatever, which was really weird, but what was weirder was Carey providing a character reference for a gangland killer, which still isn't the weirdest football-related character reference. Now, a player with no scruples obviously needed a manager with even less. Enter, Ricky Nixon. Now, association with Nixon isn't a crime, otherwise every AFL player from 1997 to 2008 would be in jail. It has to be understood, however, that not only was Nixon heavy-handed in his management style, but he has done some inexcusable things and has a pretty funny way of looking at them. Threatened your girlfriend with a knife? Ex-wife's paying for my private health. Yippee. Hit a tram full of people because you were on your phone and had a .108 blood alcohol and then decided to fuck off home from the scene before the cops show up? No one was hurt. So drug addicted he went on 10-day benders, not to mention that other thing? Well, we've all made mistakes, and you're not perfect. The sort of person who'd be in jail if they weren't well-connected or rich, and so the perfect person to manage an egotistical superstar who had a rocky childhood then. So typically for two men whose lives would become extremely wayward and, let's face it, drug-dependent, their relationship was rocky. You both seem really well adjusted. However, Nixon respected Carey's loyalty and thought he ought to be earning a bit more for it. Nixon noticed that Carey, thanks to the salary cap, was on $300,000 a year. Peanuts for the player of the 90s, excluding these ones. So what he did was convince Wayne to sell him his IP rights for $2. He then charged North Melbourne 350,000 times that amount for, quote, marketing rights, and gave just over half of that to Carey. This is what's known in the financial world as wonky bullshit, vaguely similar to Vizzy offering Chris Judd $250,000 to be a, quote, brand ambassador. Oddly, Carey was name-dropped by Judd's manager when that deal was kiboshed. Nixon revealed this deal in 2020, and he, Carey, and North received the same punishment as Judd and Carlton. 0. In fact, when the AFL called him in for a please explain, he told them in no uncertain terms, "I run this league." Ironically, Essendon got punished for a similar scam. Redemption only took about 100 years. Carey insists that he knew nothing about this, then he threw Greg Miller under a bus. You know, the same Greg Miller that helped him get to North Melbourne in the first place. Real classy gent. Then, in early 2002, Wayne decided it'd be a good idea to have an affair with someone else's wife. This alone would be enough to rank as the worst idea of his life if he wasn't already married, upgrading the act to reprehensible. But it gets even worse. He knew this woman's husband. They were close. In fact, in 2001, this is exactly how close they were. So, how did Anthony Stevens find out? Well, Glenn Archer's hosting a 30th birthday bash for his wife. No, not that sort of bash, Wayne, sit down. A 30th birthday party at his place. Wayne goes to his bathroom, presumably with a little bag of anti-inflammatories, and in full view of all their guests, Kelly Stevens follows him in. Yeah, they got found out in the stupidest and laziest possible way.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
This split the club down the middle, with players boycotting training until Carey, before the season even began, resigned from the club that had made him a footballing icon. Greg Miller, CEO of North and the man who'd brought Carey over to the club from Sydney's clutches, also left. But in his absence, the team actually banded together. Thanks to recruiting Severio Rocker the year prior, they already had an established key forward who could chip in 50 goals towards an unlikely finals run. In fact, everyone chipped in. Only Daniel Harris recorded a kick in a kangaroo jersey without scoring a goal. Bloody bludger. Actually, just kidding, he was a pretty handy player. Dennis Pagan won a lot of praise for his team's perceived overperformance and was rewarded with a massive contract, offered by Carlton. See you, Dennis. Thanks for the memories. Hope that Carlton side isn't already sinking in salary cap scandals without your knowledge. Oops, guess that's the end of your career then. Actually, speaking of Carlton, remember how they had a 20% stake in North, which is still absolutely mental? Well, they've just sold it to this man, John McGowan. Remember this name. Seriously, remember it. It'll come up later. Anyway, Pagan has just left, and he was replaced by promising Collingwood assistant coach Danny Laidley. Sidebar, I will be referring to Laidley as Danny with she and her pronouns, even predating her gender transition. Dead naming and misgendering is something I'm against. I've seen it cause hurt and anxiety to friends of mine, so I'm adhering to typical transgender naming protocol. I will not reference Danny's transition any further, as it does not concern North's story as a whole, and it seems to make a lot of people way too angry. Anyway, Laidley's new administration traded Carey to the Crows, who pissed pick 2 and 18 up the wall, and I still can't believe we did that, in order to grab the signature of a man who, by round 1 2003, hadn't played football in 16 months. He would last 1.5 seasons before his back gave out, although that last season was on pace for 50 goals. The main highlight was round 6, 2003. Wayne Carey faces North for the first time under the Melbourne Dome. Christ, he looks unnatural in that jersey. The fans, well, they had mixed reactions. The best, probably, was this enormous banner that probably took several seconds to make, and literally 2 minutes from when the broadcast picked it up for it to be taken down by the fun police. No word on if this one survived. Anyway, new captain Anthony Stevens leads his side out. He and Archer had chatted beforehand, Stevens saying that he was determined not to be dragged down to thuggery. Archer heads straight to Carey, but he's marked by Colbert and Baird, who immediately let him know whose side they're on. In a dour start, it takes nearly 9 minutes for the first score. Ian Perry wins a free for a typically clumsy entry into a pack. Carey, much like he did with Kelly Stevens, takes advantage and finishes... I've been advised to stop that sentence. Now, this is his chance to act with class, right? Some players, particularly in soccer, refuse to celebrate goals against their former club. Carey, though, doesn't. The game stays in the balance, Archer almost knocking himself out just to prevent Carey getting any more chances, but this is just typical Glenn Archer. What a champion. In the second term, Carey wanders down to half-back. He gets a kick away, but Stevens lines him up. It barely moves the king, but the kick is off target, putting Tyson Edwards in trouble. He tries to find Carey with a hand pass, and just quickly, note the beautiful punch to the gut that Archer delivers. Classic any friend of my enemy is my enemy too sort of stuff. Didn't get a suspension for this, by the way, which is incredible. Anyway, the ball bounces away. Carey grabs it, and there they are. 3 friends, all in the one frame. How nice. Archer barely disguises a swinging round fist towards Carey's kidneys while Stevens clings to him like a limpet, giving away a free with a few more shoves besides. Carey gets up with a grin directed towards his former friend whose marriage he ruined. What a nice man. Carey then negates a Crow forward 50 by illegally shepherding Stevens, and further biffo with him and Colbert sees a downfield free given, resulting in a goal to Harding, even though Archer responded to all of this with an actual punch. Nice home umpiring bias. Carey and Archer continue having words, which leads to the big moment. Archer takes a step towards Carey, who flinches and draws back a fist in response. For one moment so fleeting we almost missed it, it looked like another Battle of Britain might break out. Archer showed maturity though. He got his reaction, the one he wanted, and walked away knowing getting that hit on Wayne, as satisfying as it would be in the moment, wouldn't be worth it. Thankfully for all involved, this was as heated as it got. Carey would get 3 more goals for the game, including the sealer as the Crows ran out 9-goal winners. Stevens would miss the return fixture, but although Carey would score a Goal of the Year contender, the Roos would get their revenge in a far less fiery encounter. For Archer, though, it was never about anger. He and everyone else were just sad. They'd lost a hero, a mate, a leader, not to mention a hell of a footballer. But some good came out of this. A mutual friend of the two had cerebral palsy and had been through a lot. Arch wanted to help him out, try and get him a new house that catered for his condition. So, he rang Wayne. There's always an undercurrent of togetherness that has bound all who play for North, that's kept them alive despite their many deaths as an organisation. That proved enough to get Wayne to say yes. Thanks to Archer's manager, hello again Mr. Joseph, and his negotiation skills, they got Channel 9 to pay $200,000, more than enough for a great house back then. Simpler times. Getting back to the 2002 off-season and those picks that North got for Carey. Almost in an admission of a rebuild, Danny also traded Byron Pickett to Port for another 2 high-value picks, one of which was used to secure handy backman Lee Brown. With Carlton out of the way, surrendering their high-value picks due to their salary cap breach, the Roos had 4 picks in the top 25. Unfortunately, this draft class didn't bear nearly as much fruit as the Super Draft the year before. Daniel Wells was selected at pick 2, you'll hear more about him later. As for the rest, well, McIntosh was a good ruckman who succumbed to injury over his career. However, Chris Shaw never played a game, and Callum Urch spent more time in prison than he ever spent on North's list. A pick after each were Troy Selwood and 2004 rising star Jared Rivers. Ouch. 2002 also had a grand emotional moment. Stalwart Mick Martin's dad was sick and on his way out. The upcoming match against Richmond was sure to be the last that he was alive for. Martin, synonymous with the number 4, adopted his dad's number 30 for one game to honour him. He won the game and said it was the greatest moment of his life. He wore 2 jerseys that day. One Mick kept, and one his dad kept. Nice moment. Despite the loss of Pagan, Carey, and the awful draft class, 2002 was a positive season all in all, and there was a lot of celebration of the unity that the players displayed. Things were looking up. The team went for a post-season trip to New Orleans with 2 players stopping off in Bali on the way back. They've been through a lot as North veterans, these two, and they take this chance to really unwind before the pre-season begins. They calmly shared drinks at Paddy's bar. The bad times, well, they were behind them. It was time to look forward to the future. Inside the bar, a terrorist has detonated an explosive vest. Panic grips Paddy's bar, the ringing in everyone's ears replaced by terrified screams. People pour outside onto the street where they're greeted by a beautiful starry night that perfectly juxtaposes the burning ruins they fled from, and a Mitsubishi L300 parked in a strange place. It was a perfectly executed trap, sinister and evil, made and executed by sinister and evil people. 202 people, including 88 Australians, lost their lives either in the explosions or as a result of their wounds in horrendously inadequate hospitals. Mick Martin and Jason McCartney could have just fled then. Even disregarding their high value to their employers, sport and supporters, fleeing would be the sensible thing to do here. There would be no stain on their character or bravery if they just ran away. But like so many that night, they stayed, putting themselves at further risk and saving lives. But for McCartney, it would come at a cost. He hadn't realised it, but he'd suffered shrapnel wounds and major burns to most of his body. Martin loaded him onto a scooter and rushed him to an already overcrowded emergency department. A combination of haste and lack of hospital resources led to an infection. He was moved around, and as a result, for one horrifying moment, Martin thought his mate had died. McCartney was flown back home, nearly actually died, and undertook a painstaking recovery. He was lucky to be alive, but McCartney had a grander goal: return to AFL footy. His surgeons told him that he was no chance, that his body needed 2 years just to fully recover. His own teammates and coach thought he was no chance to return. 4 months after this photo was taken, he was out on the training track at Arden Street. In March, he made his comeback for Port Melbourne in full-body bandages that took hours to prepare, which protected his still tender and hypersensitive new skin grafts. He made good progress, but with each game it was clear that although his drive and desire still shone bright, it was chipping away at everything he had left physically. And then, on the verge of selection, a calf injury sidelined him, which itself was a complication of his shrapnel wounds. Another 2 weeks wasted. But then, finally, his chance comes. North Melbourne versus Richmond at the Dome. For the second straight year, this fixture is surrounded by emotion for North. Danny Laidley has selected McCartney. To hear Laidley somewhat callously tell it, the decision to include him was almost a charity case after Jason had told Danny of his decision to retire at the end of the season. Laidley, though, was always ready to give McCartney a game, as Jason was a loyal club servant who'd shown merit through his determination. The game was steeped in tributes for the victims of the bombing, with each North jumper bearing an ode to the lives lost that was reflected in thousands of banners, well, A4 pieces of cartridge paper, around the stadium. McCartney, known for being humble and self-effacing, somewhat reluctantly ran through a banner with a 20-foot tall effigy of his own face on it. He spent the whole first term on the bench, thanks Lades. The defender then lined up at full forward to start the second, and as he ran into position, the Richmond cheer squad gave him a beautiful ovation. It was a great moment, sure, even though he didn't get a kick until the 9-minute mark of the third quarter, but his game really started in the final term. The 2003 Roos side was a team in transition, and it showed. The Roos entered the game 5-5-1 and were getting challenged by a Richmond side that hadn't yet realised how crap it actually was. The margin only stayed above 2 goals for about 4 minutes all game, with the Roos wasting 9 third-term scoring shots by only scoring 2 goals to carry a 3-point lead into the final change. The Roos clear it away from the bounce, and McCartney out-wrestles Andrew Kellaway to take a mark. Jason McCartney was one of the guys whose hands you really didn't want the footy in for a situation like this. This was his 8th mark inside 50 this century, with the mainly defence-based McCartney only having multiple scoring shots in a game 8 times in the last 9 years. He scores a goal once on average every 3 games and has a career conversion rate of 55%, and that was before he was blown halfway to hell. The chances he scores this are unlikely, to put it charitably. But sometimes football isn't about numbers. It's about storylines, moments that contradict the numbers they're made up of to tell stories greater than the sum of their parts. And so, with both cheer squads cheering him on, Jason McCartney slots the goal through. 24 minutes later, North are in trouble, 3 points down with time running out. The ball is pumped desperately into the forward line where it bounces into McCartney's hands, but Kellaway immediately wraps him up. Lesser players would panic, but after all Jason has been through, this is nothing. Calmly, he wheels around and kicks for goal. Of course he doesn't get it, and frankly, I wouldn't want him to. He's not supposed to be the saviour. That's not what all of this was about. No. While in danger, McCartney helps people, and they help him. He's not the hero. He's never said that he is. He's the inspiration for the rest of us to help lift ourselves to the sort of heights he hit and overcome adversity, overcome evil, and, if 2003 Richmond is a metaphor, overcome mediocrity. Lee Harding finishes the move off with a goal, giving North a lead they would not surrender. Jason McCartney would live the rest of his life with pain and complications from the injuries that he had less than no say in getting, not to mention the mental scarring that cuts so much deeper than the burns. But this had made all of his suffering worth it. He'd just wanted to play one more time, but this moment was so much more than that. He'd become an inspiration. He retired in his post-game interview, getting that fairy tale ending that so few people get, and that football clubs functionally can never achieve. Seriously, footy clubs don't get these moments. This, one of their own players getting hit with 2 explosions, is looked back as one of the high points of the Kangaroos era brackets 1999 to 2007 end brackets. Let's rewind a bit to the Kangaroos' last home game before all of this. This game is only notable for where it's being played. Here, loyal GAZ-man viewers might remember the story of Canberra's failed AFL bid. Their consolation prize was offering money to any cash-strapped Victorian sides willing to sell home matches, with Tasmania subsisting off the same table scraps. Teamed with the name change, the foothold here in Canberra was designed to establish new fans west of the Dandenongs. They got good numbers there too, but that wouldn't be enough. Carey had left early and the Roos struggled to fill his shoes. Yes, Severio was handy at times, but the bridge between him and the peak of Drew Petrie was cavernous, and neither of those men were anything like Carey was. Okay, 2006. One of Melbourne's last games is a non-joke in the 2000s. Nathan Thompson, fresh off a 50-goal 2005, has 5 for the day, levelling the scores deep into the last to stave off a run of 3 demon goals. He then misses a shot which gives North the lead and decides to bench himself. North would struggle to hit targets for the remainder as James McDonald wins the game up the other end. Thompson did make up for it though by kicking 8 the next week. He then got 5 goals over the next month, missed the whole of 2007 with an ACL, had his depression made fun of by Wayne Carey, what a nice man, and retired the next year at 30. That's how it was in that forward line. False hope aplenty, talents that sizzled but fizzled. 2007, Laidley's last season in charge was bizarre from start to finish. No, really it was. It began and ended in the stupidest ways possible. Round 1, home against the Pies. The Roos are in it all day but have a tragic one in front of goal. It's 10-17 to 12-10 as Shannon Grant marks some 50 metres out. Heath Shaw refuses to get on the mark and Grant gets a 45. metre penalty. Regardless, it's an easy goal from here. Grant, or Grant, however the hell you want to say it, is a master of the impossible and pulls more tricks out the bag as he nails the post from 9 metres out. The only other score is Lindsay Thomas's 5th behind. Pies win by 3. North start 0-3 but win 14 games to come a lonesome 4th. Unfortunately, they face a Cat side that will win the grand final by 119 points and remain the last team to win multiple finals games in the same series by triple digits. That includes this game. North, or should I say the Kangaroos, then managed to prove that winning finals with a good forward line is entirely optional. 4 goals each to Edwards and Harvey, sinking the Hawks. The power lineup that loses to the Cats the next week by 119 faces them, and obviously the Roos lost, and they lost obviously, never being in it outside of 2 goals in the first term to Shannon Grant. Hello again. They score 2 goals 15 after that, losing by 87 in proof that God is dead and we have killed him. Laidley era North Melbourne from 2002 to 2007 was so thoroughly average that they hadn't really become a powerhouse in the 1990s like West Coast, and so, like Carlton, as their results shifted, so too did their definition and public perception. But unlike Carlton, their big star had been cast out in his prime. There was no other player, yet, who would capture the league's attention. No player who would draw eyeballs from within and from outside to the blue and white. No Judd, no Buckley, no Lloyd, no Goods. Laidley's coaching style changed from game to game. It meant that they could take big scalps at times, but the Kankers had no footy brand the way they had under previous coaches. The only newsworthy feature would be when their players committed increasingly brash acts of hooliganism. Imagine getting thrown out of a Lionel Richie concert. I mean, what did they do? Crochet too aggressively? In this period, they averaged almost exactly 11 wins. Their percentage was as close to 100 as any team got in this period. Before September 2007, they made 2 finals, lost both, and didn't fall far enough down the ladder to be interestingly bad. This is the period that North completely fell off the map. The only interesting thing about them was where they played 3 games a year, and then, inevitably, that fell apart as well.
The AFL had always wanted to break into rugby territory, and New South Wales was always the heart of that pitch. And the Kangaroos had been part of that drive before. From 1999 to 2002, the Roos sold home games to Sydney, playing on the same SCG that an actual team named after the city struggled to draw fans to, and big shock, it failed. Then they got moved to Canberra to break into yet another rugby market, which had only become so because the VFL-AFL had completely forgotten about this area. This was a comfortable deal. The stadium was more than fit for purpose without much cash injection. The Roos got paid, Canberra got footy. All was well. It suited the Roos. The rent at the AFL-owned Docklands Stadium was so steep they needed to hit 28,000 tickets sold per match to break even. A lot of times they didn't hit that mark. But then the Southport Sharks stepped in and said, "Dave, here's $2 million. Come play 3 matches per year in the Gold Coast instead." The Roos took the money, ditching Canberra in the night to play at a desolate Carrara Oval from 2007 onward. The Roos were over $4 million in debt by this point, more than Fitzroy were when they went under, and even an official club-sanctioned documentary about this period in their existence went so far as to say that the club and the brand had become irrelevant. They had the smallest supporter base and the 3rd least assets on hand.
Then the AFL got its biggest, juiciest carrot it could get its hands on and dangled it just out of reach of the Kangaroos. The Kangaroos were offered $100 million to move to the Gold Coast, not to simply play games, but to relocate permanently to a rugby market. This, of course, came on the eve of a couple of grand final appearances by a team named after a cardinal direction which had been bankrolled by the league to relocate from Melbourne to a rugby state. Of course, North would start from a much better place, richer, with a better initial list, ground, supporter base and staff. It was a tempting offer, very, very tempting.
The AFL went in hard early, trying to get North legends on side. Ron Barassi endorsed the move purely because he didn't want to see North fold in 10 years, while Demetrio tried to seduce Glenn Archer, which backfired spectacularly. Archer wanted the league to give a year of leeway, and if the Roos failed to hit their marks, then he'd champion the move. Demetrio said no. Now, I could speculate that his reasons were purely to combat the NRL's own Gold Coast expansion, which had debuted that year. Instead, I'll let him say it himself. So, winning the hearts and minds was incompatible with the AFL not having any patience. What they did have, though, was money, and a rare way to use it. North was still the only non-member-owned club. Why waste time on the members, Andrew Demetrio thought, when the AFL had the cash to simply buy the shares, buy the club, and then do with it what they wished? The first approach made to the controlling stakeholders as a whole was rebuffed. Then Demetrio, as he did, got sneaky and started sniping at them one at a time. Peter Peter owned some 30% of the shares, and Bob Ansett still had guarantees on a large supply through shelf deals. The AFL tried and failed to sway both, Peter seeing that selling the shares was a betrayal. Never matter, there were still other shareholders that could be bought out, and this is where John McGowan comes back into play. After the board rolled President Graham Duff, McGowan and his 20% share stake roll into town on top as acting head honcho. He was all in on the AFL's plan, which was this. All shares would be bought back for $3.6 million, technically at a loss to investors, with the AFL nullifying those shares, presumably after the club gets moved, and returning the club to member ownership, those members being 1,000 miles away from their club. Oh, and the club gets $100 million, even though some thought the actual additional bonus would be less, minus existing handouts. But North loyalists were steps ahead. Alan Aylett's son Rick won the CEO role over the AFL's preferred candidate in Mark Brayshaw. You might know his brother, actually, and he's here too. A North fan all his life, James Brayshaw had been in the media since the 90s when Mark was drafted by them. He'd replaced Eddie Maguire on The Footy Show in 2006, beginning the show's decline from footy-focused entertainment to wacky bullshit antics, but he successfully used that platform and others to maintain the profile of the Kangaroos, or what profile there was. Ron Joseph had brought in the Brayshaws for extra anti-relocation numbers on the board and media presence, maybe not knowing he'd potentially Trojan horsed the club. But it wasn't enough. The board was still at loggerheads, and after a disastrous board meeting resulted in little more than Brayshaw family squabbles, the AFL gave the club 2 weeks to make their decision, essentially 2 weeks to live. During all of this, though, North fans had been galvanised, particularly by James Brayshaw, into action. Future Roos president Sonia Hood, among others, led a range of fan coteries, activist movements and fundraisers for the pro-Melbourne cause. Tim Rogers, UMI frontman and noted North Melbourne tragic, hosted a benefit concert which many Roos, including Archer, disobeyed club rules to attend and bucked club trends by not getting kicked out. The fans were disenfranchised, having no say in decisions. Yes, some fans had bought shares back in 1986, but the fan share percentage tally only made up 10% of all distributed voting power shares. Any other club's fans in 2007 had some say over the board makeup and club choices. Hell, even Fitzroy's fans held the power to veto the 1996 merger if they so chose. North, well, their fans didn't have any sort of say whatsoever. Jim Brayshaw, though, was pivotal behind the scenes, generating $8 million of support from wealthy backers and getting so bored of endless roundtables that he told the board to hurry up and vote already. The AFL, though, are quietly confident. McGowan's obviously voting their way, Mark Brayshaw was their Trojan horse, and they had 2 other votes locked in on the 7-man board of directors. 6 votes in, the tally is at 3-3, and Fulvio Inserra sits as the casting vote. With the club's future on his shoulders alone, he votes to stay. A pivotal call, as the members' meeting was that night at the Dallas Brooks Hall. The place was packed with fans like this, holding placards like this. You might recognise this fan, actually. Hi, Luke. How's it going? Do check in about 10 years' time when you're the captain of this operation. With the directors in the minority immediately resigning, Brayshaw became the president, and so his first act was to sweep into that hall and declare the Roos were going nowhere. 2,500 people cheered till they were hoarse. The AFL were stymied. Worse, they were pissed. They had the numbers. They knew they had the numbers. Someone switched last minute, and it turns out it was the man they thought was maybe the safest bet of all. Mark Brayshaw. The factor that got him was the stadium deal. 100 million sounds sweet, but it meant nothing if the stadium rent, a massive expenditure, was a big question mark. Jimbo was big on that point and ended up convincing Mark enough to sway him. The Roos were safe. Except they weren't. The $8 million care package would come in the form of an Ansetian shareholding scheme. Fortunately though, this time the stock market crash came before the share float, saving North from what would have been total extinction. Luckily, the club got by on increased membership and sponsorship garnered from the good vibes of their win over the AFL, plus the somewhat unlikely but critical help of Peter Scanlon, the man who tried to merge them in the early 1990s, but the shares were now more trouble than they were worth. In 2008, Eugene Arocca arrived as the new CEO, an outsider, the perfect man to wrest control of the shares back and give the club back to its members. Peter and Ansett all voluntarily gave their shares back when asked in early 2009, but the others needed more convincing.
Arocca and Brayshaw presented a vision for the future that had this at its centre. New facilities at Arden Street that weren't old demountables you'd find on a building site in Adelaide. It was risky, building in the shadow of the global financial crisis, but it was either that or lose the funding for the project and fracture the shareholders irreparably. They did it, and, well, quite clearly, it worked. Right after that Dallas Brooks Hall meeting, James Brayshaw underlined his vision to keep North at North by changing the club's name for the fourth and final time back to what it was, back to what it always should have been, the North Melbourne Football Club. The AFL, whilst happy to fund the new digs at Arden Street, didn't really seem to be jumping for joy at North's plucky survival.
It really seemed like the league wasn't on North's side, and round 6 2008 didn't help matters. The Roos held a 20-point lead late in the game. The Swans chipped away at that lead, finding themselves 1 point down with 55 seconds to go. Darren Jolly, Adam Goods and Brett Kirk combined to attempt a winning score, only to see Michael Ferrito play goalkeeper and save 2 premiership points for North. It's a draw. Just one thing though, Darren Jolly was on the bench before this play. He came onto the field for it, no biggie, except that no one came off to replace him. Sydney had 19 men on the field. Now, the only way, even today, that a team can be pinged for having 19 men on the field is if the captain of the other team asks the umpire for a head count. This means stopping the game, lining up each team, and doing a school roll call. This obviously isn't going to happen whilst defending a narrow lead in the last minute of a game, and since whoever was looking at the bench apparently decided to beat the traffic home, the Swans could not receive the appropriate penalty of having their score completely wiped. And yes, I have a dog in this fight, as my beloved Eagles were scammed out of a SANFL Grand Final appearance by eventual Premiers North when they scored 8 points with an extra man on the ground in a 7-point win. This match should have changed the rules. Calming down now, and as it was, the AFL being incompetent and all, Sydney copped a $55,000 fine and North missed out on a home final. Instead, they travelled to Sydney. They gave up a 25-3 head start and lost by 35 points. Woof. Oh, also David Dench went to jail for fraud. Kinda symbolic. What North needed for 2009 was just a quiet year to reconstruct their image away from the public eye. That didn't happen. April 2009. 8 players, including club captain Adam Simpson and leadership group member Daniel Pratt, have an idea for a short film. The club has this rubber chicken, which they've adopted as a mascot shared amongst the player group called Little Boris. All perfectly normal. My handball national squad had a stuffed kangaroo called Pedro, who was awarded to a player of merit after each game. Simple morale-raising stuff. North took it a step further with these 8 lads creating a film called The Adventures of Little Boris. In this film, Boris meets, buys, and romances a frozen chicken. All humorous stuff, I guess. Then the two get down to business in Brady Rawlings' locker. Don't worry, they used protection. A bit weird, but considering this was made for private sharing amongst the players, understandable if a metaphor for the objectification of women in a sense. Juvenile, but not necessarily noteworthy. Then it gets ugly. The frozen chook, a stand-in for a woman, don't forget, is thrown at a wall and ran over to the tune of Move Bitch, a song I remember thinking was cool when I was 11. The DV parallels were discovered as soon as the video was released on a small site called YouTube. You may have heard of it. As well as club sponsor Mazda's logo and club cars being visible. Not a good look. This, especially after Wayne Carey's recent Las Vegas arrest for battery, Reed allegedly glassing his new squeeze, where he somehow assaulted a female cop, resisted arrest so much they had to literally hobble him and only got a $500 fine and community service, was not a good look for the club's attitude toward women. Pratt and Simpson were fined $5,000 in addition to giving the strangest footy show interview I've ever seen. Reactions were what you'd expect. Sam Lane got death threats for reporting the story and I guess for wanting footy players to have better standards for their behaviour around women. North also refused to send players to her show before the game unless she was absent from the panel. So yes, they've always had shitty reasons for excluding certain members of the media, even if they are dickheads so inflammatory, no amount of white powder could alleviate them. To his credit, Pratt handled the situation better than his own club. They then lost to the Hawks by 9 goals, a deserved fate. Still, at least that was the last time North personnel would treat women poorly. For Laidley, it was almost the last straw. Laidley had thought about resigning for months, and the fallout from Chicken Gate added to her mental stress. After a couple of false starts and some weird comments about Daniel Wells, Danny Laidley packed it in at the end of July. Darren Crocker filled her shoes as the Roos jutted to a 13th place finish. The question marks over North's home base haven't gone away. After their rejection of the Gold Coast deal, North tried crawling back to Canberra for some extra dough. They were told in no uncertain terms to piss off. That bridge burned beyond repair, only to be replaced 3 years later by a suspiciously expensive orange and charcoal one. Luckily, North had a backup. They'd entered a deal with Tasmania's short-lived VFL side in which they could drop AFL-listed reserves players down to Tassie in a move that the Apple Islanders hated. But I want to take a sidebar for a second. It's 2010, where in the arse end of a North Eagles game no one really gives a shit about, Brent Harvey picks up the ball, some 95 metres from his own goal. This is game 282 for the now 31-year-old, and the oldest man on the ground by 3 years has had an amazing night. The result is sewn up, and thanks to what will be a 44-touch, 11-mark performance, so are the 3 votes. This may be the best game Harvey has played in his life, but he wants to make it better. Harvey at this point is well known for his pace and endurance, and here he goes again. All he has is a knackered Matt Prentice within his postcode. And I can't stress this enough, oldest man on the ground by 3 years pulls away from the future Brownlow winner. Even after 5 bounces, only 3 Eagles are within the vast swathes of field the TV camera shows. On bounce 6, Prentice disappears entirely. Darren Glass leaves his man to take Harvey, but Brent sells maybe the least convincing candy in footy history. Glass, one of the best defenders of his generation, somehow takes the bait. Harvey takes bounce number 7. Another Eagle blocks his path. It might be Beau Waters. Instead of taking him on, Harvey takes his chance. He flushes it from about 48. Malcolm Blight spurs the kick on as it flies through the majestic rows of empty seats that only a North home game at the Docklands can provide. Brent Harvey has just kicked the most amazing point you'll ever see. Oops. Oh well. Despite him getting another 6 running bounces that game, this performance still doesn't break his top 3 in that stat. No one has taken more running bounces at the top level than this man. And even though he missed, that means I get to talk about Brent Harvey for a bit. That's always good. I like Brent Harvey. That's the official position of the GAZ-man channel. Brent Harvey is a good dude. Looks fit as hell, actually, like he could play forever. Hope North don't screw him some way down the line. Anyway, back to the stories, and the Roos are still copping batterings from ambulance chasers like Caroline Wilson, fueling speculation that the club would move to Tasmania after having shut the door to Queensland. North entertains talks with Ballarat, however they failed to commit as hard as the Bulldogs would end up doing. The Dogs now play twice a year in Ballarat, often winning easily as they're now accustomed to its Arctic winds. They also get better crowds, with North's record at the ground coming in a pre-season game, ironically against those very Bulldogs. North would settle on Tassie as a home away from home, selling games there from 2012. However, James Brayshaw is handling the media circuit well enough to bat away the rumours of a permanent move, allowing new coach Brad Scott to ruin his legacy of success and toughness with a coaching spell defined by mediocrity and petty feuds. On the field, he was uncompromising, tough, and would not accept defeat. As a coach, his North team would roll over like a dog without warning and settled for a worse sort of mediocrity than Laidley. 9th, 9th and 8th his first 3 seasons, a walking C-. There was then a slight hiccup. Social media is a different place in 2011. Facebook rules the roost and there were myriad groups, pages and communities you could follow. Problem was, if you followed a dodgy one, everyone could see it. The Brochel Network was such a group, posting non-consensual images of young women. The images were, of course, lewd in nature, and the whole page was obviously disgusting and abhorrent. Allegedly, Jack Zeeble and Robbie Tarrant were added to this group without their consent, somehow. The correct thing to do would be to remove yourself. The incorrect thing to do, and what either one of these 2 players did, was add Hamish McIntosh as well as 3 other players to the group and then plead innocence after the fact. It was a scandal that went nowhere in the end, but one that showed North still had some ways to go in the education of players concerning the treatment of women. On the field, things were turning around, though. The midfield was now led by the evergreen Harvey, still as quick at 32 as he was at 19. And the new skipper in Andrew Swallow, a fresh Sid Barker medal, now the 3rd in his cabinet. Lindsay Thomas had turned into a 50-goal-a-year excitement machine up front, but if there's one figure I really want to talk about from this period, well, it's Brent Harvey, but if there was another one, it's their other 50-goal forward from this era. Remember the Ryan Pagan brouhaha? Well, during his 3 games, there was a young, tall forward that caught the eye. He kicked 6 goals from 2 games despite North losing both, and although he'd be in and out of the side the rest of the year, he'd risen to the attention of other clubs. Well, one other club. Adelaide were pretty happy with the forward they'd prized loose from the Kangaroos the year prior. Scott Welsh had won their goal kicking for the first of what would be 4 times, with 47 spearheading a weird little forward line that would only get weirder as the 2000s rolled on. What they lacked, and what they'd always lacked, was a true tall. Welsh at 188 centimetres wasn't it. Evan Hewitt at 193 centimetres was. Now, the Crows were blessed with a wicked draft hand after trading Sean Wren for pick 12, but the draft had few tall options, Sav Rocker and Corey Jones being the standouts of a bad bunch. So, in the first of 2 monumentally bad trades the Crows would make that would doom their future in 2001, pick 23 bought Evan Hewitt's services to SA. 2 seasons, 15 games, and 6 goals later, his time in the AFL was over. As his replacement, North, with pick 23, refused to draft either of these 2. Maybe they knew both of them would join the club at some point anyway. Or Maybe they had some late mail on a skinny kid from Ballarat who would become a key linchpin of the team for 16 years. Drew Petrie was, in the nicest possible way, football spack filler. At 197 centimetres, he was both taller than the average forward and more agile than bigger ruckman. This meant he could be used as an effective second foil both up front and in the ruck, plus he was quick and rangy enough to stall off a key forward when used down back. You can see the shift here across 4 subsequent years. In 2003, he's the second tall forward behind Big Sav but ahead of Corey Jones. The next season, the return of Corey McCartney sees him drift more into defence but still rotate forward when needed. 2005 sees North lose McCartney again and Mark Porter as well, but gain Nathan Thompson up front, necessitating Petrie's move into the ruck in a tandem with young David Hale, where Drew leads the club for hitouts. And in 2006, Drew leads the club for 1%ers as he shifted permanently into the back line, with McIntosh covering second ruck duties when he's fit. When he took home the club's leading goal-kicking trophy in 2011, the year after breaking both of his feet, he became, to my knowledge, the first man to lead his club across various seasons in goals, hitouts, and 1%ers, and he was damn close to getting all of those titles twice. Okay, here's where I break out the properly weird stats. A lot of players have unique styles, but it's super rare to see someone have a statistical profile all of their own, where they have more of certain groupings of stats than anyone else. Here's Gary Ablett Jr.'s, here's his dad's, here's Scott Pendlebury's, and here, thanks to time spent all around the ground, is Drew Petrie. He is the only man to average a goal, 3 1%ers, and half a rebound per game, and he did so across 334 matches. But his finest moment came in Glenn Archer's 300th game, round 13 2007, against a Bulldogs side that was still a Barry Hall and a Jason Ackermanis away from really competing, but still sat in 7th, 2 places above Petrie's Roos. Brian Lake, again no dead naming, was having a best and fairest season at fullback and was only a few weeks away from holding Fraser Gehrig kickless. It took Petrie 27 seconds to outmark Lake and score goal number 1, a typical set shot blast from 50. About 4 minutes later, he presents again, this time outmarking the other guy who had a Brownlow medal taken off of him due to suspension. The angle is reversed, the distance and result are the same. It takes only 3 minutes this time for Harvey to find Petrie mismatched against the smaller Matty Boyd, and this shot is like shelling peas. 3 goals in the opening 8 minutes of a game is an outrageous start, but it's only about to get better. Less than a minute of game time passes before Thomas hoiks one up to the hotspot. Chris Grant and David Hale, both giants, sit under the fall of it. Then Petrie, whose pace breaks him free of Lake, sits on both of their heads. 10 minutes, 4 goals. Corey Jones joins the party and Petrie soaks up time by applying a few tackles. A long kick forward sees Grant and Lake both commit to Lee Brown. Okay. It falls to the floor and here's our man. What went undervalued in addition to his unmatched versatility and great acceleration for a big man was his hands. Petrie's ground ball game was supreme for a big forward player, and when a guy's playing this hot, all he needs to do is throw it on the boot. 5 goals, the most he's ever kicked in a game to this point, and there's 10 minutes to go in the first term. The Bulldogs, by the way, haven't scored a goal yet. They do, though. Farron Ray. Jeez, I forgot he played for the Bulldogs. Anyway, he chips in for the Bulldogs first at last. It's been a whole 5 minutes now since Petrie scored. Let's fix that. He leads all alone, somehow, and scores his 6th goal of the term in just over 12 timed minutes. He's on pace for about 35 goals, but he calms down from here. A goal in the second, his last meaningful contribution, landing him on 7, a tally he won't beat in any other match in his career. But look at this. There's a lot of very good forwards who never get to have a quarter like this, let alone guys who spent the last 18 months mainly in the backline. Coming into this one, Petrie was 6th in the league for spoils. Imagine if Harris Andrews got moved forward and scored 6 in a term. That's what this felt like. Anyway, that's more than enough whimsy and happiness. Let's cut to 2013. It was a weird year, one I'm calling the Season of Pain. Let me introduce you to it straight away. Round 1. The Roos get 11 points up late in the second against the Pies. They then ship the next 6 goals and allow the Pies to get a lead of 36 points into the last. A late rally sees the Kangaroos fall 16 points short. Round 2. Against Geelong, North sizzles out of the gate. 10 minutes into the second, Geelong have 4 goals. So does Drew Petrie by himself. A Bundy Christensen goal on the eve of half-time cuts the margin to 35. The Roos are home. Geelong then scores 7 goals in the third and have 11 scoring shots in the last, with Jimmy Bartell giving the Cats the lead for the first time with a minute of timed play to go. The Roos had led all day prior to that, and it did not matter. Round 3. The Roos lead the Swans at the half by 10, having only conceded 36 points at home in a half. Sydney then score 70 points to 9 in the third. Game over. Round 5. After North finally secured a win against an awful Brisbane, they roll into the MCG and really take it to Hawthorn. An inspired 10 minutes from Thomas sees them take the lead, which they surrender in half that time. A Gunston goal puts the margin at 11, but Hawthorn will only score a behind after this. North have 4 scores from then until the siren. 3 shots miss. They lose by 3. They finally close out a close one against an average Port, beat the Dogs, and then travel to Subiaco to face, West Coast. A hot Roos first term goes to waste as the game becomes a shootout. Wright and Black miss chances late though, and a Shuey goal keeps the game alive. Then, with 30 seconds to go, this happens. Nick Natanui, the man with the highest leap in football, is allowed to just waltz up to the pack in his own time and soar above a tired North defence. He missed a shot earlier tonight, but he fails to make that mistake again. North lose by 2. Surely it can't get worse than that.
Oh, a setup. That's very good, sir. Thank you.
North came out of the blocks hard against a fading Adelaide side at home, scoring 7 of the first 8 goals to lead by 39 after only 33 minutes of play. Unfortunately, they shipped 7 of the next 10, only leading by 10 at the half. A fast start in the third term blows the margin out to 27 in the opening 8 minutes. This looks like a scoreworm at a blustery ground like the Whitten Oval or indeed Arden Street, but this was at the Docklands with the roof closed. There was no wind advantage, just pure momentum. This north side couldn't be broken through by any one man in the tricolours. With Walker ruled out due to an ACL, only Vince and Jenkins had scored multiple goals in the opening hour. Then, an unlikely hero enters the fray. Sam Kerridge had played less footy than only one man on the ground. However, he had played decent football in his 6 prior appearances, netting 2 goals against the Hawks and 3 in the Crows' demolition of the Giants. He pops up here and scores 2 either side of a Zeeble goal. He then scores a third with a Jenkins major closing the gap to 12. A late North goal and some Crows misses, typical, sees the gap extended to 16 at the final change. Then, the Roos put it to bed. They score 20 points in 10 minutes, the Crows only managing 8 to extend the lead to an even 5 goals. North and Adelaide then score a behind each over the next 5 minutes. Overall, there's about 9 or 10 minutes left on the clock. Then Kerridge pops up again. He scores, but there's no hope in these scenes really. 5 minutes pass. McCartney does his usual thing, another miss. The Roos bomb it to the wing. Smith breaks clear, sends one to Paul Pleasure. He makes space for a teammate, and there he is again. Sam Kerridge has kicked 5 goals in a half of footy. North just need a goal. 1 goal to seal this thing, and they win the centre clearance. Sam Wright runs in for goal from distance and misses. Adelaide rebound it the whole way up the field. Paul Pleasure, Douglas and Lynch combine, and Richie Douglas converts to reduce the gap to 12. All the Roos need to do is lower the tempo and they win. They don't. They keep playing like they're the ones who are down. Like this. Petrie takes a mark so good he gets marked himself by 3 members of row A. He takes his allotted 5 seconds. Now, a defensive option should present back here for an easy mark. This player could then chip it back to Petrie, taking around 20 seconds off the clock. Continue like this, win game. Instead, Petrie offers up this lame duck, easily spoiled, throw in. Off the throw in, Aaron Mullett again ignores short options to bomb it long. A contest that North of course fails to win results in a free to Daniel Talia. North players are all out of position, the Crows easily rebound it. A dump kick ends up with Lynch, he's tackled, he's lucky to get a handball out to Paul Pleasure, who's had a massive impact as the sub. Lynch receives it again, sells some tasty candy, avoids this blatant trip attempt, and he sends a long one home that uncharacteristically falls short. Ben Rutten wrestles for the mark, but he and his opponent both miss, leaving Sam Kerridge to mark unopposed. He pops through his 6th. Adelaide are only a goal down. Dangerfield wins the clearance, bombs it long, contest spoil. Jared Petrenko is there and misses. 5 points the difference, 90 seconds left. Ferrito takes the kick out and no options present, forcing him to go long instead of wasting time with chip marks. North are lucky enough to win a free at the contest. Petrie again has the choice now. Kick it backwards and win the game, or bomb it long. No, Drew, that was the bad option. Talia spoils easily to the boundary line. Swallow gets the ball from the throw-in but is met by half the population of Adelaide. The ball spills out. Swallow might think he's lucky not to be caught for holding the ball, but Douglas gets it anyway. He tries to find Kerridge because why wouldn't you when he has 6, but Drew Petrie again wins a free against Ben Rutten. Okay. Now, you're up by 5 with 43 seconds left, and your last clearing kick almost resulted in a rebound coming the other way. Do you A, turn around to the 5 men you should have behind the ball at this point, kick it to any one of them and milk the clock like a Frisian cow? B, realise Brad Scott is your coach so you don't have any extra men back like any other coach would do, and call Scott Thompson, not that one but the North one, close so that you can retain possession with a 15-metre mark and waste a bit of time that way? Or C, bomb it long down the line so all this shit can happen again? Well, guess what the North defence chose? Thompson points for Drew to go long, and he obliges. 2 North players go up trying to spoil to the boundary. 1 Josh Jenkins goes up trying to keep the ball alive, and Jenkins wins it so convincingly he actually maintains possession. He's dragged down but thumps a bouncing ball forward. 4 Kangaroos are within 5 metres of the ball here compared to 1 Crow, but that 1 Crow is Sam Kerridge, who has decided to be Gary Ablett Sr. for today. He bombs a high one. 8 men are in the Crows' forward line. Half are Kangaroos. Brad Scott honestly saw his side concede 4 goals in 8 minutes and thought, no, I'll not only instruct every player to kick exclusively long bombs, but I will send only 1 extra man down, even if he is man-marked by an Adelaide extra man. Trust the one-on-ones. That extra man, Ben Rutten, occupies 2 North defenders in the contest because he is a giant. They call him the Truck. The hint is in the name. That's why you need another extra man down there, Brad. The other 2 have given Jared Petrenko a 2-metre head start, goal side. Petrenko isn't even supposed to be here. He was a late inclusion in what happens to be Indigenous round. He breaks free and lashes a boot at the ball, a half volley in hope that, of course, sails through the big sticks with only 16 seconds to go. Adelaide will win the centre clearance, and ironically Bernie Vince does what Drew Petrie had 3 chances to do, and chips it short to Paul Pleasure, who wastes just enough time for the siren to go. North lose by 1 point.
Welcome to hell, motherfucker!
Round 11. Against the Gold Coast side still unable to get out of their own way, North cap off a fine move to score through Thomas's 4th shot of the game to move 32-1 up a minute into the second. They would score their next goal 48 minutes later. Gibson and Black would chip in late goals, but the Suns had momentum, with Ablett getting 33-2 on the Suns' way to a 15-point win. North then slept their way through scoring 29 against Peak Ross Lion Freo, then won 2 games by 10 goals in a row, and then round 16 happened. A Bastenac miss with about 5 left in Q3 puts the Kangas 33 points up, their biggest lead in a match they've dominated against and I can't stress this enough, shithouse Brisbane side. In the next 14 minutes of play, the Lions score 6 goals, taking the lead. A double salvo through Petrie and Wells just delays the inevitable as a glut of 4 Lions goals, including one from Josh fucking Green, sees the 13th place Lions home by 12. Round 17, North are down 6 at the half and then Carlton piles on 5 goals 5 in 20 minutes. As late as 4 minutes into the last, Carlton are still 5 goals up. North score 5 more goals than Carlton over the rest of the match, but still fall short by 1. North then butter Melbourne up to become GWS's only 2013 victim before getting up big against Geelong and actually staying there. This is brilliant. They've learned their lesson. Right?
No.
Round 20. Adelaide again, this time away. Oh joy. Adelaide gets up by 34 halfway through the second, but wastes chances doing so. North then scores 6 of the next 7, being sure to miss heaps of chances of their own on a damp day, but Daniel Wells managed to keep this one on the straight and narrow from 89 metres. Feels like I've seen this one before. McMillan grabs the lead, which is wrestled away by Lynch, before Goldstein grabs the first at the last turn to put North 2 points up. They will score once more. Adelaide scores 6 times in a 7-minute span, 2 of them majors, and the end margin is 9 points.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
Round 22. In a match that really isn't worth talking about, North lead by 25, but then get blown away towards the end, Hawks win by 12. Frustratingly, North decided to actually win a close one with a last-term spell in the final game, promoting them to a completely useless 10th place.
You bastards.
After Essendon's relegation, Carlton, who were 9th, were promoted to September action. Carlton had 11 wins with a percentage of 106.7. North had 10, but with a percentage of 119.5. That Carlton game, or indeed any of the 9 games North lost by 15 points or less, cost them finals action. In fact, let's run a thought experiment. Say that North finds a backbone and wins just the ones they either lost right at the end and the games where they led by 4 goals at any point. That's not too unreasonable. Let's see how the 2013 ladder looks. Adelaide are the big losers, dropping both their North games, falling to 14th. Both Coasts and Brisbane drop a win, but only 1 spot between them, so who cares? Geelong and Hawthorn both lose a win, but were so far in front that they maintain their 1-2. Nothing changes. However, North adds 7 wins to their ledger, moving from 10th to 3rd. Add that Carlton game and they slide up above a now 17-win Cats. As for those Hawks, well, remember that 3-point margin decided by poor finishing in round 5? Well, if the Roos had converted 1 more chance on top of all of this pretty reasonable revisionism, they end up top.
What the fuck is this? That is insane. That is like the worst. That is beyond that.
North had the best record in first terms of any team. In all others, they were exactly average, leading to 3 wins by 7 to 12 points, yes, but also to a 0-5 record in games decided by a goal or less. No other team comes close to North's 10 losses by 3 goals or fewer within 2013. In fact, their plus 373 point differential gave them around 16 expected corrected wins. The difference between this and their real number is 6.27. Only 2 teams from the VFL's Old Testament have beaten it. If you only include teams from eras with more than 8 sides, only 3 teams have come within 1 less squandered win than these 2013 Roos. It's something that Brad Scott sought desperately to address over the off-season, and in 2014, their 3-10 record in close ones shifted to 5-1. And guess what that did? Yep, it's finals time, baby! North would do the same thing in 2014 as they would do in 2015, finish in the bottom part of the 8 and work their way methodically to the prelim final, only to lose, convincingly, to the team who would lose the big game to the Hawks. To be fair, 2014 ranks a bit higher because of the famous Frank the Tank clutch goal from Petrie to beat the Bombers late on, which extended their finals win drought into the time I'm currently speaking, and by the looks of things, well beyond into the future. This was all a prelude, though. 15 years North had spent becoming completely irrelevant footy-wise and becoming some weird off-field circus. I haven't had time to touch on absolutely everything. David Hale's betting thing, Jim Cracker getting out of prison and straight into an Eddie Maguire masturbatory interview exclusive, everything Aaron Edwards did, Ryan Crowley's Craig Kelly impression on Brent Harvey, the Scott Rockcliffe stoush, David King's betting thing, how Matty Capuano's career ended, the weird false flag racism thing involving but not actually involving Winston Abraham, and also how his career ended, poor guy, Matthew Campbell's crazy night out, the multiple drink driving incidents of Byron Pickett, Corey McKernan's feud with Dennis Pagan. Seriously, this was such a weird time. I've had to cut a lot of corners here, and even this is too long of an episode, but North's recent successes and the phasing out of the bullshit in 2015 had signalled they were now ready to make one more charge to get the ultimate prize. North were now about to shift into the best thing they'd been for nearly 20 years. Win streaks to start the season are the best way of announcing your premiership credentials early. The invincible Collingwood side, the machine of 1929, obviously had the best, but many other teams have found their way to double-digit streaks at the start of the year. Even St Kilda had begun 2019 19-0. North, though, well, haven't. Since 1925, their best streak was 8 in the Barassi days. They've only had 3 other streaks of 5 or more. However, of all people, Brad Scott would mastermind their best ever start to the season since joining the VFL. It began against Adelaide, who opened Q3 with a goal that stretched the lead to 24. 2013 North would have melted. Hell, they would have melted if they were 24 points up. 2016 North came back and won by 2 points, thanks to Harvey scoring 3 goals in 6 minutes, Ferrito taking a game-high 9 marks, and a late and valuable Petrie goal. Jared Waite took his Brownlow vote tally to 4 in 2016 by kicking 5 against the Lions, with Wells and Harvey making valuable contributions. Petrie took 9 marks this time, whilst Dal Santo and Gibson chipped in with multiple majors. North then got in a shootout with an improving Melbourne, and despite Gawn recording 63 hitouts, Goldstein took the 3 votes by scoring 5 goals. The only other time he'd done that was against 2009 Melbourne. He wasn't even the highest scorer on the ground. Boomer, in game 412, kicked 6, with Ferrito producing more rebound 50s than any other 3-man combo on the night combined. Daniel Wells, belying his age, made 7 tackles. 4 from Waite saw North home easily against the rampaging Nat 5's Fremantle, and another bag of 4 saw off the Bulldogs. Mason Wood sealed a victory over the Saints, which would become ironic some years later, and a Sam Gibson masterclass secured a tight win over a spirited Essendon, 2 goals from Petrie in both games, proving vital. Carlton then tried to fight peak Todd Goldstein with Daniel Gorringe. Oh, that really didn't work too well. That was like Daniel Gorringe against Dave Hughes. All of a sudden, the Kangaroos were 9-0, 2 games clear at the top. Could this be their year?